Dear parents, my name is Kumbia Shinoiki from Kumbi's Music Company. Thank you so much for joining this particular presentation where I'll be talking about the problem with practice. So, we all know that with any endeavor in life, it is essential that you put in as much time as possible because the more time generally you put towards an activity, especially when it involves skills acquisition, the more progress you make, the better you get. Now, when we look at music practice and we compare it with other extracurricular activities that children get involved with, we notice very stark differences in how practice is done. So typically, especially with regards to sports and activities, practice can be done, it tends to be done outdoors. It tends to be a social activity in that it involves lots of other children, and it's fun. With music practice, you find that a lot of it happens indoors. It can be a very solitary experience. Even if your child is in a band or an orchestra, they still need to find time to learn their own parts of the performance in solitude. And also it can be incredibly tedious. Those of us who've listened to children practicing skills over and over again know exactly what that sounds like. So how do we crack the practice nut? How do we get our children to a place where practice isn't in a battle of the wills, where it happens effortlessly almost? Well, one of the first things we need to consider are two factors: motivation and engagement. Motivation is the reason why you perform a task, and engagement is the way you go about it, how you perform the task or activity. There are two types of motivation. You've got extrinsic motivation, where you're performing a task or an activity because of what you're going to get out of it. It might be in form of rewards, accolades. It might be because you're trying to win somebody's affection. But once those factors go away or are no longer relevant or no longer important to you, so does your motivation. It ends. Intrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is where you're doing something because you want to, and you get the reward and satisfaction from doing it internally. And external rewards do not change how you feel about that activity. Looking at engagement, the way we go about doing an activity or a task, negative engagement is where we perform a task from a place of unwillingness or reluctance or fear. And positive engagement is where you perform a task from a willing and a joyful place. When we superimpose the two sets of factors, we realize that we've got four different quadrants in which our children may fall. So if we look at quadrant 4, here the engagement is negative. And also the motivation is extrinsic. So the child is only doing the activity in order to please others or for the rewards, and is really unwilling to put in the effort, is quite reluctant to do it. Quadrant 3, there's very little reluctance. The child actually enjoys doing it and is happy to put in the effort, but they're only doing it for some external reason, whether to please others or for some reward that they might get out of it. In quadrant 2, the child is very unwilling to put in the effort, but they do enjoy it when they get round to it. I think you'll find that a lot of teenagers might fall in this particular category. And in category 1, there you have all the ducks lined up in a row. Everything is perfect. The child absolutely loves the activity and is doing it because they want to, not because of any rewards, not because they're trying to impress anybody. And so it's important for us to understand as parents and as carers where our children fall into, which one of these quadrants are they in, and to think about strategies in which we can deploy to help to move our children to quadrant 1. This is the sweet spot. This is where we would love all our kids to be. Now, we often find when children first start taking lessons, they're in any of these other categories. They're either in quadrant 2, 3, or 4. very, very, very rarely do we find young children, especially, in a position where they know this is what they want to do and they're willing to do it. And so, therefore, we cannot give up on children in any of these other quadrants, but we first need to recognize where they are and then see what we can do as parents and carers and educators to help transition them to quadrant 1. So, like we've looked at before, over time, we tend to build on our skills and we progress from being a novice to an amateur to an expert and eventually to a pathfinder. At any point along this curve, we may well drop out. We may well, decide to stop progressing. The biggest dropout rate happens at the novice phase, where the activity is very new. It involves a lot of work. The motivation is extrinsic, and progress is slow. And usually you'd find that people will stick with something for a little while and then think, oh, what am I bothering? And just drop out. And so you find that if you don't have the right factors in place, the right motivators in place, we will lose a lot of people at the novice level. Those who manage to, keep going and get to the amateur stage, get to a point where their performance of the task or the activity is acceptable. It's nowhere near virtuoso, but it's comfortable, it's acceptable. And they decide, I'm happy with where I am. I really don't want to put in the work to get up to an expert. I'm quite happy to tail off here. We also find that quite a few people, especially children at school, the higher up they get in the school system, and the better they get at their music, at some point, due to the pressures, especially with academics, will find that they kind of tail off at the amateur stage. Moving along, at the expert stage, you actually keep going. You push past all the difficulties and all the disappointments and all the demotivating experiences in the beginner stages, and you become actually very good. And you get to a point in your life where you have to make a choice. Do I pursue this beyond where I've got to right now and sacrifice something else? Or do I sacrifice this and in order to pursue something else? It gets to a point where, as an expert, you have to make a decision. And then you get the pathfinders. And those are the ones that, I've decided that this is what I'm going to do. And they kind of set that they become trailblazers. They become a go-to resource and authority in that particular discipline. And so usually when your children taking lessons with us, they are somewhere between the novice and amateur stages. And at this phase of learning, I tell you that the motivation is mostly extrinsic. And we need to find continually creative ways to stimulate that extrinsic motivation and help them to engage positively with music until at some stage that becomes embedded and intrinsic, and they're able to pursue the pursuit of music to a higher level. And so I'm going to end here, and I'm just going to ask you to think, in which quadrant is your child? In which quadrant do they fall? 1, 2, 3, or 4? And when we come back next time, we'll be looking at ways and strategies in which we can promote positive engagement and help lead our children to a place where motivation is intrinsic. I hope you found that useful. Please do reach out to us if you have any questions. We would love to hear from you, and look out for our next video in the series. Thank you so much.